The wedding hall erupted in applause as the bride smiled for the cameras, but in a forgotten storage room beneath the celebration, a young woman sat on the floor with a split lip and trembling hands. Her phone had only one contact left she dared to call. When the line connected, she whispered just 6 words. "Can you come get me, please?" There was no answer, only silence. Then the call ended. Minutes later, the music outside faded as a convoy of black vehicles rolled to the entrance. Security guards who had laughed moments earlier suddenly stepped aside without a word. Men with expressionless faces entered first, scanning every corner. Behind them walked a man no one at the wedding recognized, calm, perfectly dressed, his expression unreadable. The frightened woman looked at him with relief instead of fear. Everyone thought they had just interrupted a family wedding. They had no idea the quiet woman they had humiliated was the only person the city's most feared mafia boss had ever promised never to abandon. The Grand Marcellus Hotel had hosted governors, celebrities, and foreign diplomats, but tonight its crystal ballroom belonged to one wealthy family celebrating a wedding that everyone called the social event of the season. Music echoed beneath glittering chandeliers. Waiters carried silver trays through crowds dressed in tailored suits and designer gowns. Cameras flashed as guests competed for the perfect photograph beside walls covered in white roses. Every smile looked effortless. Every conversation sounded polished. Only one person seemed invisible. Emily Carter stood near the service entrance with a tray of untouched champagne glasses balanced in her hands. She was not part of the hotel staff, yet no one questioned why she had been ordered to help. Her younger sister, Sophia, was the bride. Their mother had insisted that Emily stay out of the photographs. "You always look tired," she had whispered earlier. "Don't ruin your sister's memories." Emily had simply nodded. Arguing had never changed anything. For years, she had learned that silence usually ended pain faster than defending herself. She carefully placed another tray onto a nearby table before stepping aside as guests laughed around her. Nobody thanked her. Nobody noticed she had been working since dawn. At the center of the ballroom, Sophia accepted compliments with effortless grace. Their parents stood proudly beside her, introducing important guests as if they had built the perfect family. Emily watched from across the room, not with jealousy, only with the quiet sadness of someone who had spent years wondering what she had done wrong simply by existing. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "There you are," her aunt approached with an irritated expression. "The florist forgot more candles." "Go downstairs and find the hotel manager." Emily looked toward the dance floor. "I think the staff can." "I wasn't asking." Several nearby relatives turned to watch. One of her cousins folded his arms. "She's lucky we even invited her." Soft laughter followed. Emily lowered her eyes. Without another word, she walked toward the service hallway. Behind the ballroom, the celebration disappeared almost instantly. The music became distant. The bright lights faded into narrow corridors filled with stacked chairs and supply carts. She reached the lower storage level and searched for the manager's office, but every hallway seemed empty. Then she heard footsteps behind her, her uncle. He closed the storage room door. His face carried the same frustration he had shown throughout the day. "You embarrassed this family again?" Emily frowned. "I haven't done anything." "You always do." He grabbed her arm. His grip tightened. "You couldn't even smile for your sister." "I was helping." "You always have excuses." He shoved her backward. She lost her balance and struck the edge of a storage shelf before falling onto the cold floor. Boxes crashed beside her. Pain shot through her shoulder. Her uncle stared down at her. "You should have stayed home." Without another word, he walked away, locking the storage room door from the outside. Silence returned. Emily remained on the floor for several seconds, trying to steady her breathing. Her lip had split against the metal shelf. A thin line of blood reached her chin. She slowly searched her handbag. Her phone remained inside. The battery showed only 4%. She opened her contacts. Hundreds of names had disappeared over the years. Friends had moved away. Some had stopped answering. Others believed the stories her family spread about her. Only one number remained saved. There was no photograph, no last name, just one word: Adrian. She stared at the screen. Almost 6 years had passed. She had promised herself she would never disturb him. She did not even know whether the number still belonged to him. Outside, muffled applause echoed from the ballroom above. The wedding ceremony was beginning. Emily closed her eyes. Her thumb pressed the call button. One ring, two, three. She almost ended the call. Then the line connected. Neither of them spoke. She could hear only slow, controlled breathing on the other end. Her voice barely escaped. "Can you come get me? Please." Silence answered. Not cold silence, measured silence. As though the man listening needed only those 6 words. The call ended. Emily looked at the dark screen. For a moment she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Upstairs, the orchestra began playing again. Guests applauded. The wedding continued. Across the city, however, inside a private conference room overlooking the skyline, a man slowly placed his phone on a polished black table. More than 20 powerful men fell silent. No one dared interrupt him. He looked toward the window. His expression did not change. But for the first time in years, every plan for the evening had just become irrelevant. The conference room occupied the highest floor of Blackstone Holdings, a corporation known to the public for international logistics, real estate, and private security. Very few people knew that behind its polished glass walls operated the most disciplined criminal organization in the city. Nothing inside the room was accidental. Every chair faced the same direction. Every document had been arranged with exact precision. Every man seated around the table had earned his place through years of loyalty, intelligence, and absolute discretion. No one spoke unless invited. At the head of the table sat Adrian Morty. His tailored charcoal suit carried no visible signs of wealth beyond its perfect fit. He wore no rings, no expensive watch, no display of power. He had never needed symbols. His reputation entered every room before he did. A map of the city's shipping routes glowed on the large screen behind him. For the past hour, executives and trusted captains had been discussing a growing problem. 3 rival organizations had quietly formed an alliance. Their goal was simple: take control of the eastern shipping corridor that Blackstone Holdings secretly controlled. One wrong decision could cost millions. One careless move could start a war. Marcus Hale, Adrian's oldest advisor, pointed toward the screen. "Our contacts confirmed another shipment disappeared this morning." No reply. Marcus continued. "If we don't respond within 48 hours, they'll believe we've become cautious." Still nothing. Adrian studied the map without emotion. His silence forced everyone else to think harder. He never rushed decisions. He expected everyone around him to arrive at the truth before he spoke. Finally, Adrian asked a single question. "Who benefited?" The room became quiet. Several men exchanged uncertain glances. They had prepared reports, surveillance, financial records, and security footage, yet none had asked the simplest question. Marcus lowered his eyes. "The Falcon Group." Adrian nodded once. "They want us looking west while they move east." No one challenged the conclusion. Experience had taught them he was rarely wrong. Before another discussion could begin, a phone resting beside Adrian vibrated once against the polished table. The sound was almost inaudible, yet every person in the room noticed. Adrian never allowed interruptions during meetings. His phone remained face down. It vibrated again. Marcus looked surprised. "Should I have someone handle it?" Adrian turned the phone over. The screen displayed only one name: Emily. The room remained silent. No one recognized it. Adrian looked at the name for nearly 2 seconds before answering. He did not activate the speaker. He simply held the phone beside his ear. No greeting, no introduction, only silence. Then he heard her voice, soft, weak, barely above a whisper. "Can you come get me, please?" Nothing more. The call ended. Adrian continued looking at the blank screen. His expression remained unchanged, yet something invisible shifted inside the room. Marcus had worked beside him for 12 years. He recognized the smallest changes. Adrian's breathing had become slower, not with anger, with focus. He placed the phone carefully on the table, then he stood. Every man in the room immediately rose to his feet, not because they had been ordered, because no one remained seated when Adrian did. He buttoned his jacket. Meeting adjourned. One of the younger captains hesitated. But the Eastern Corridor, it will still exist in 2 hours. The captain instantly fell silent. Marcus stepped closer. You require security, Adrian answered without looking at him. Yes. Standard team? No. Marcus understood immediately. He walked toward the conference room doors. Within seconds, encrypted messages spread through Blackstone's private network. Every instruction contained only 3 words: protect the boss. Downstairs, drivers abandoned scheduled assignments. Private elevators were secured. Communication channels changed frequencies. Vehicles left underground garages with disciplined precision. No sirens, no unnecessary speed. Everything happened quietly. Employees working ordinary office jobs noticed only that several executives had suddenly left the building. None of them understood why. Inside the private garage, Adrian approached a black armored sedan. His personal driver opened the rear door. Before entering, Adrian asked one question. Grand Marcellus Hotel? The driver nodded. 23 minutes. 15. The driver gave a single respectful nod. No further explanation was needed. As the convoy exited the underground garage, Marcus watched from the entrance. He had witnessed Adrian face assassination attempts, betrayals, financial disasters, and gang wars without changing expression. Tonight felt different, not because Adrian appeared emotional, because he appeared certain. Marcus quietly turned to another trusted lieutenant. Find out who Emily Carter is, the lieutenant frowned. You've never heard the name? No. The boss never mentioned her. Marcus looked toward the disappearing convoy. That is exactly why we need answers. Across the city, wedding music continued beneath crystal chandeliers. Guests laughed. Champagne glasses touched. Photographers captured perfect smiles. No one inside the ballroom realized that every passing minute brought them closer to the arrival of a man whose presence alone could silence an entire city. The ballroom glowed with warm, golden light. From the stage, the wedding looked perfect. The bride smiled as guests applauded. Her father welcomed business partners with proud handshakes. The orchestra played softly while waiters moved through the crowd carrying polished silver trays. To everyone watching, it was a celebration of love. To Emily Carter, it was another performance. She was still trapped inside the storage room beneath the hotel. The cold concrete floor pressed against her back as she leaned against the wall, trying to ignore the throbbing pain in her shoulder. The split on her lip had stopped bleeding, but every breath reminded her of the fall. She looked toward the locked metal door. No footsteps, no voices. Her family had forgotten she was there, or perhaps they remembered and simply did not care. She closed her eyes. It was not the first time. Years earlier, after their father lost a major business investment, the family had needed someone to blame. Emily had become the easiest choice. She had been the quiet daughter who never argued, never defended herself, and never demanded attention. When Sophia won awards in school, relatives praised her intelligence. When Emily earned good grades, they called it luck. When Sophia made mistakes, they were forgiven. When Emily made small ones, they became family stories repeated at every holiday gathering. Over time, those stories became truth in everyone's mind. Even people who barely knew her believed she was difficult. Eventually, Emily stopped correcting them. Silence required less energy. Above her, applause echoed through the ceiling. The wedding ceremony had ended. The reception was beginning. Guests were probably raising their glasses. Sophia was probably smiling for another photograph. Emily wondered whether anyone had noticed she was missing. Deep down, she already knew the answer. Outside the storage room, 2 hotel employees pushed a cart through the hallway. One of them paused. Did you hear something? The other listened for a moment, probably pipes. They continued walking. The sound of rolling wheels faded into the distance. Emily almost laughed. Even strangers assumed the building was making noise, not a person asking for help. Her phone vibrated once. She looked at the screen. The battery had fallen to 2%. No new message, no missed call. She stared at Adrian's number. For a moment, she questioned herself. Maybe he had changed numbers years ago. Maybe someone else had answered. Maybe he had recognized her voice and decided not to return. After all, 6 years was a long time. People changed. Lives moved on. Promises faded. She placed the phone beside her. "I shouldn't have called," she whispered to herself. Upstairs, Sophia stood with her new husband greeting guests. One of the bridesmaids looked around. "Where's your sister?" Sophia's smile barely changed. "I'm sure she's somewhere feeling sorry for herself." Several people nearby chuckled politely. Their mother overheard the conversation. "If anyone asks," she said quietly, "tell them Emily wasn't feeling well." "What if someone goes looking for her?" the bridesmaid asked. "No one important will." The conversation ended there. The music continued. Near the entrance, the hotel's general manager reviewed the evening schedule with his staff. Everything was running exactly on time. Security had reported no problems. VIP guests were satisfied. The event appeared flawless. Then one of the security guards touched the earpiece in his ear. His expression changed. "What?" The voice on the radio repeated itself. The guard looked toward the front entrance. "You must have the wrong hotel." Another pause, then he stood completely still. "I understand." He immediately walked toward the manager. "Sir, what is it?" "A convoy just entered the property." "So, there are 8 vehicles." The manager frowned. "Political security." The guard slowly shook his head. "They didn't identify themselves." "Then who are they here for?" "I don't know." Before the manager could answer, another guard hurried across the lobby. "They're requesting the main entrance cleared." The manager looked confused. "Requesting?" The second guard swallowed. It didn't sound like a request. Downstairs, Emily rested her head against the wall. She had no idea what was happening above her. She simply watched the small battery symbol blinking on her phone, 1%. She smiled sadly. "That's about right." The screen suddenly went dark. The battery had died. For the first time that evening, she was completely alone. She wrapped her arms around herself and waited. Not because she believed someone was coming, because she had nowhere else to go. Outside, the first black sedan rolled silently beneath the hotel's grand entrance. Then another, and another. Valet stopped moving. Conversations near the entrance faded. Guests standing outside instinctively stepped back without understanding why. The lead vehicle came to a smooth stop. Its rear door remained closed for several seconds. No one spoke. No one moved. Then the door slowly opened. A polished black shoe touched the pavement. Adrian Morty stepped out without haste, adjusted the sleeve of his coat, and looked once at the brightly lit hotel. His face revealed nothing. But everyone near the entrance felt the atmosphere change. He had not come for the wedding. He had come for one person. The music inside the Grand Marcellus Hotel continued for a few more seconds. Then it slowly faded. Not because the orchestra had finished the song, because the musicians, like everyone else near the entrance, had begun looking toward the lobby. Something had changed. The conversations became quieter. Guests standing near the glass doors exchanged uncertain glances as 8 black vehicles formed a neat line outside the hotel. None of them carried company logos or government plates. The engine stopped at exactly the same moment. Every door remained closed. For several long seconds, no one moved. The silence itself became unsettling. The hotel's general manager hurried toward the entrance, forcing a professional smile onto his face. "Good evening," he said to the nearest man stepping from the lead vehicle. "May I ask if we can assist you?" The man was dressed in a dark suit with a discreet earpiece. His expression remained calm. "We're here for someone." The manager nodded politely. "May I ask who?" "You may." The answer came without hostility. It simply ended the conversation. The manager opened his mouth again, then closed it. He instinctively stepped aside. One after another, more men exited the vehicles. They did not spread through the hotel aggressively. They simply positioned themselves with quiet precision. One remained near the entrance. Two moved toward the elevators. Another checked the emergency exits. None of them touched anyone. None of them raised their voices. Yet everyone nearby suddenly became aware of how carefully organized they were. Then Adrian Morty stepped from the final vehicle. He adjusted the cuff of his charcoal coat and looked at the hotel for only a moment before walking inside. No bodyguard walked in front of him. No one announced his arrival. He required neither. People moved aside before he reached them, not from fear they could explain, from instinct. Inside the ballroom, whispers spread from table to table. Who is that? I've never seen him before. Is he a government official? No, he doesn't look like one. Sophia noticed the attention shifting away from her. She frowned. What is everyone staring at? Her husband followed the guest's eyes toward the entrance. I don't know. Emily's father walked toward the lobby with the confidence of a man accustomed to important visitors. He extended his hand politely. Good evening, I'm Richard Carter, father of the bride. Adrian stopped. He looked briefly at the offered hand. He did not take it. Instead, he asked one quiet question. Where is Emily Carter? Richard blinked. My daughter. Yes, a small laugh escaped Richard. I'm afraid you've interrupted the reception. Adrian waited. The silence stretched. Richard suddenly felt uncomfortable. She's around somewhere. Adrian's eyes never left him. That wasn't my question. Marcus, standing a few steps behind Adrian, noticed Richard's confidence beginning to disappear. He had seen this countless times. Adrian rarely repeated himself. People usually answered before he needed to. Richard cleared his throat. I haven't seen her recently. Adrian turned slightly toward one of his men. Find her. The instruction was spoken so quietly that only those nearest heard it. 4 men immediately separated without another word. No one asked for details. No one hesitated. Downstairs, beneath the ballroom, Emily remained sitting against the storage room wall. The hotel had become strangely quiet. She frowned. The music had almost disappeared. Instead, she heard distant footsteps. Many footsteps, measured, purposeful, not hurried. She lifted her head. Someone stopped outside the locked door. Another voice spoke softly. This one. A metal tool slid into the lock. Emily instinctively moved backward. The lock clicked. The door opened slowly. Bright hallway light filled the room. A man in a dark suit stood in the doorway. His expression was respectful. Miss Carter. Emily stared without answering. You don't know me, he continued calmly, but someone is here for you. Her heart began beating faster. She slowly stood despite the pain in her shoulder. Who? The man stepped aside. At the end of the hallway stood Adrian, exactly where the light from the corridor met the shadows of the storage level. His posture had not changed. His expression remained controlled. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. 6 years disappeared into silence. Emily looked down, suddenly embarrassed by her torn dress and bruised face. I'm sorry, she whispered. Adrian took a single step forward. His eyes briefly noticed the split on her lip, the swelling around her wrist, and the dust covering her clothes. He did not ask who had done it. He did not demand explanations. Instead, he asked only one question. Can you walk? Emily nodded once. I think so. He offered his hand, not dramatically, but simply as if it were the most natural thing in the world. After a brief hesitation, she placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was steady, careful, and gentle enough not to hurt her injured wrist. He helped her to her feet without another word. For the first time that entire day, Emily did not feel invisible. When they emerged from the lower hallway together, dozens of wedding guests were already watching. Whispers swept through the lobby. That's Emily. What happened to her face? Who is that man? Sophia's smile disappeared. Their mother took one step forward. Emily, where have you been? Everyone's been worried. Emily looked at her mother, then at the guests. No one had searched for her. No one had called her. The lie hung heavily in the air. Before Emily could answer, Adrian spoke for the first time since entering the hotel. His voice remained calm. She won't be staying. No anger, no raised tone, just certainty. The entire lobby fell silent. No one challenged him. No one even knew his name. Yet somehow everyone understood that the evening had just changed forever. The silence in the hotel lobby felt heavier than any argument. More than 200 guests watched without speaking. Emily stood beside Adrian, still trying to understand whether this was real. Only minutes earlier, she had been locked in a storage room, convinced that no one would notice if she disappeared. Now every eye in the ballroom was fixed on her. Her mother forced another smile. "Emily, sweetheart, you're upset. Come back inside. We can talk as a family." Emily looked at her. For years she had wanted to hear those words. Tonight they sounded empty. Adrian remained still. He did not interrupt. He simply waited. Emily took a slow breath. "I don't think there's anything left to say." Her father stepped forward. "This is a private family matter." His voice was firm, but it carried less confidence than before. Adrian met his eyes. "It stopped being private when she asked for help." No one replied. The sentence was quiet. Its weight settled over the room. Richard Carter looked around, hoping someone would support him. Business partners avoided his gaze. Even relatives who had laughed at Emily earlier suddenly found the floor more interesting. The truth had become difficult to ignore. Adrian turned toward Emily. "Let's go," she nodded. Together they walked through the lobby. No one blocked their path. The bodyguards maintained a respectful distance, creating space without drawing attention. Outside, the cool evening air replaced the warmth of the ballroom. The city lights reflected across the polished surface of the waiting sedan. The driver opened the rear door. Emily hesitated. "I don't want to cause problems for you," Adrian answered simply. "You already decided that 6 years ago." She looked at him, confused. He motioned toward the car. "Come." The convoy left the hotel quietly. No speeding, no flashing lights, only a line of black vehicles disappearing into the city's evening traffic. Inside the sedan, neither of them spoke for several minutes. Emily looked out the window as familiar streets passed by. She still struggled to believe that the same quiet young man she had once known now traveled with a security convoy. Finally, she broke the silence. "I didn't think the number would still work. It never changed. You knew it was me." "I recognized your voice." Emily lowered her eyes. "I almost hung up." "I know. You know. You stopped breathing for 3 seconds before you spoke." She looked at him with surprise. "You remembered that?" Adrian looked through the windshield. "You always held your breath when you were afraid." The words carried no emotion, only memory. 6 years earlier, rain had covered the city that night. A younger Adrian sat alone outside a small neighborhood clinic, his white shirt stained with blood that was not entirely his own. His father had died 2 hours earlier, not from illness, from betrayal. The organization that would later become his empire barely existed then. He had lost almost everything in one night. People passed without looking at him. Some recognized him. Most chose not to get involved. Emily had been leaving the clinic after visiting her grandmother. She noticed the young man sitting alone beneath the broken streetlight. Everyone else walked around him. She stopped. "Are you hurt?" Adrian had looked up but said nothing. She handed him the umbrella she was carrying. "You'll get sick." "I don't need it." "You do." He tried to return it. She smiled gently. "Keep it until the rain stops." He stared at the umbrella for several seconds. "Why are you helping me?" Emily had shrugged. "Because nobody else is." She never asked his name. Never asked why his shirt was covered in blood. Never asked what had happened. She simply sat beside him in silence for nearly an hour. When she finally stood to leave, she noticed his injured hand. Without saying anything, she wrapped it with a clean bandage from her handbag. "Take care of yourself." Then she walked away. She expected never to see him again. 3 days later, Emily arrived home from work. A small package rested outside her apartment door. Inside was her umbrella, folded neatly. Along with a handwritten note, "If you ever truly need help, call this number. I will come." No signature, only a phone number. She had saved it under one name, Adrian. Back in the present, Emily quietly wiped a tear before it reached her cheek. "I thought you gave that promise because you were being polite." "I don't make promises politely." She gave a small, tired smile. "No, I suppose you don't." The car grew quiet again. After several minutes, Adrian spoke. "You never called." "I didn't want to owe you anything." "You don't." "I do now." He looked at her for the first time since leaving the hotel. "No." His answer was immediate. "You helped a stranger expecting nothing." "I remembered." Emily looked away again. Outside, the skyline slowly disappeared behind taller buildings as the convoy approached the private district where Adrian's estate overlooked the city. She had no idea what awaited her there. She only knew one thing. The promise she had almost forgotten had never been forgotten by the man who made it. And somewhere behind them, at the Grand Marcellus Hotel, the Carter family was beginning to realize that the quiet daughter they had spent years humiliating had just walked away with a man whose influence reached far beyond anything they had imagined. The convoy passed through a pair of wrought iron gates that opened without hesitation. Beyond them stood a sprawling estate surrounded by old trees and carefully maintained gardens. From the outside, it looked like the home of a successful businessman, quiet, elegant, and private. Nothing suggested that decisions made inside its walls could influence half the city's underworld. The vehicles came to a smooth stop beneath a covered entrance. Before Adrian stepped out, one of his security officers opened the rear door for Emily. She looked at the mansion, then back at Adrian. "I've never been somewhere like this." "It isn't meant to impress people," he replied. "It's meant to keep them safe." Emily followed him inside. The entrance hall was spacious but understated. Marble floors reflected the soft lighting, and shelves filled with books lined one wall. There were no gold statues, no extravagant displays of wealth, no trophies celebrating power. The house felt disciplined, like the man who owned it. A middle-aged housekeeper approached with quiet professionalism. "Good evening, Mr. Morty." She noticed Emily's bruised face and paused. "Prepare the East guest suite," Adrian said, "and ask Dr. Lewis to come." The housekeeper nodded once. "Immediately." She asked no questions. Meanwhile, across the city, the wedding reception had collapsed into confusion. Guests gathered in small groups, whispering about the mysterious man who had taken Emily away. Richard Carter stood in his private lounge with Sophia, his wife, and several close relatives. His patience had finally broken. "Find out who he is." One of his business associates looked uneasy. "We're trying." "Try harder." The man hesitated. "I've already made a few calls. And no one wants to discuss him." Richard frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means every person I contacted ended the conversation the moment I described him." The room fell silent. Sophia folded her arms. "He's probably some wealthy investor trying to play hero." The associate slowly shook his head. "I don't think so." "Then who is he?" "I don't know." And that's what worries me. At the same time, in an abandoned warehouse near the eastern docks, another conversation was taking place. Three men sat around a scarred wooden table. They represented three different criminal organizations. For months, they had secretly worked together against Adrian's empire. One of them tossed a tablet onto the table. The screen displayed security footage captured outside the Grand Marcellus Hotel. Adrian stepping from his vehicle, Emily beside him. The image froze. A man with silver hair leaned forward. "I've never seen him leave a strategy meeting for anyone." Another nodded. "Neither have I." The third man studied the photograph. "So this woman matters." The silver-haired man smiled faintly. "Everyone has a weakness." Another voice answered immediately. "Or a strength." The first man ignored the comment. "Either way." He tapped Emily's image. "We need to know everything about her." Back at the estate, Dr. Helen Lewis carefully examined Emily's injuries. The split on her lip required only minor treatment. Her shoulder was badly bruised but not broken. More concerning were the older marks hidden beneath the sleeve of her dress. The doctor remained professional. "These bruises aren't recent." Emily looked down. "No." Helen finished wrapping her wrist before speaking quietly. "You've been carrying this alone for a long time." Emily managed a small nod. "I didn't think anyone would believe me." The doctor looked toward the closed bedroom door. "You aren't alone anymore." When the examination ended, Helen stepped into the hallway. Adrian was waiting. Nothing life-threatening, she reported. But, she paused, she's been living under emotional pressure for years. Adrian listened without interruption. The physical injuries will heal. The others will take longer. He nodded once. Thank you. After the doctor left, Adrian remained standing in the hallway for several moments. Marcus approached from the opposite end. We've identified today's guests. Adrian looked at him. Anything unusual? Marcus handed him a folder. Our surveillance confirms something interesting. He opened the file. 3 executives attending the wedding have indirect financial ties to the Falcon Group. Adrian read silently. Marcus continued. They weren't there for the wedding. They were watching. Adrian closed the folder. They expected an opportunity. Marcus nodded. And I think they found one. Across town, inside a luxury penthouse overlooking the harbor, the Falcon Group's leader received another report. A young operative placed photographs across the glass table, Emily entering Adrian's estate, security positions around the property, vehicle routes, shift changes. The older man studied each image carefully. So, he said quietly, the great Adrian Morty finally opened one door. He looked out over the city lights. We don't attack him, the operative frowned. No, no, a slow smile appeared. We let him protect her. Why? Because protecting one person forces powerful men to make expensive decisions. He turned back toward the table. And expensive decisions create mistakes. At the estate, Emily stood alone on the guest room balcony. The city stretched endlessly beneath the night sky. For the first time in years, she felt physically safe. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that her single phone call had set something much larger into motion. She didn't know that men she had never met were already studying her photograph. She didn't know rival organizations were quietly rewriting their plans because of her. And she had no idea that Adrian, standing alone in his office, had already begun preparing for a conflict he had hoped would never reach her. Morning arrived quietly over the Morty estate. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, replacing the darkness that had covered the gardens only hours before. Birds settled in the old oak trees surrounding the property, and for a brief moment the estate felt like any peaceful home. Emily stood beside the guest room window, holding a warm cup of tea she had barely touched. She had slept for only a few hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the storage room. She heard the lock turning. She felt her uncle's hand gripping her arm. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Miss Carter, it was the housekeeper. Mr. Morty asked if you would join him for breakfast. Emily looked down at her borrowed clothes. I don't want to disturb him. You won't. The housekeeper smiled gently. He wouldn't have asked otherwise. The dining room overlooked the eastern gardens. A long table filled the center of the room, yet only 2 places had been prepared. Adrian was already seated, reading a thin folder while drinking black coffee. He looked up as Emily entered. Good morning, she nodded politely. Good morning. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence. Breakfast was served simply, fresh bread, fruit, eggs, and tea. No servants hovered nearby. No unnecessary conversation interrupted the quiet. After several minutes, Emily finally spoke. I should leave today. Adrian placed his coffee cup on the table. Why? I've already caused enough trouble. You haven't. I have. She looked down. Because of me, people are watching your house. They were watching long before you arrived. This is different. It is. She met his eyes. They'll use me against you, Adrian answered calmly. They'll try, and if they succeed, they won't. His confidence was not arrogance. It sounded like a fact he had already accepted. Emily looked away. You can't know that. No, he folded his hands together. But I know my responsibility. Later that morning, Marcus entered Adrian's office carrying another intelligence report. Our surveillance teams confirmed increased activity around the Eastern District. Adrian nodded. Expected. They're testing our response times. And, Marcus placed photographs on the desk, 3 unfamiliar vehicles have followed our convoy route since last night. Keep watching. Marcus hesitated. There is another concern. Adrian looked up. Some of our captains are questioning your decision. They believe protecting one civilian exposes the organization unnecessarily. The office became quiet. Marcus waited. Finally, Adrian spoke. Bring them. Within an hour, 5 senior captains gathered inside the private conference room. Every one of them had served the organization faithfully for years. None were disloyal. They were practical. One of the older captains spoke first. Boss, Adrian nodded for him to continue. We understand loyalty. We understand debt. But risking operational security for someone outside the organization, he paused carefully, is dangerous. No one else interrupted. The captain continued. Our people are asking whether emotion is influencing judgment. Silence settled over the room. Adrian remained seated. His expression did not change. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. How many people work under this organization? The captain answered immediately. Just over 3,000. And why do they remain loyal? The captain frowned slightly. Because we protect our own. Adrian nodded once. What happens the day they believe promises have expiration dates? No one answered. If I abandon one promise because it is inconvenient, he looked slowly around the room. Why should anyone believe the promises I make to them? The room fell completely silent. The captains exchanged brief glances. No one had considered it that way. Adrian stood. I am protecting more than one woman. He buttoned his jacket. I am protecting the value of my word. Without another sentence, he left the room. The captains remained seated. One quietly exhaled. I understand now. Marcus looked toward the closed door. So do I. Emily spent the afternoon walking through the estate gardens. The peaceful surroundings made everything feel strangely unreal. She stopped beside a small fountain. I don't belong here, she whispered. She had spent her entire life trying not to become a burden. Now an entire security team adjusted their routines because she existed. The guilt became unbearable. That evening she made her decision. She packed the few belongings she had. She wrote a short handwritten note. Thank you for keeping your promise. You shouldn't have to pay for my problems. Please don't look for me. She placed the note on the bedside table. Just after sunset, she quietly slipped through a side entrance normally used by gardeners and maintenance staff. She believed no one had seen her. She was wrong. High above the estate, inside the security control room, a monitor displayed every movement along the property. An officer immediately reached for his radio. Marcus raised a hand. Wait! He looked toward Adrian, who stood silently watching the screen. Should we stop her? Adrian's eyes remained on the monitor. Emily was already walking down the tree-lined road beyond the gates. After several long seconds, Adrian answered. No. Marcus looked surprised. Boss. If she believes she's protecting us, he paused. Forcing her back would only prove she was right to run. Marcus slowly lowered the radio. But she'll be vulnerable. Adrian picked up his coat. Not alone. He walked toward the door. Prepare the vehicles. Outside the estate, Emily disappeared into the evening crowd, believing she had finally freed Adrian from the burden of protecting her. She never noticed the dark sedan quietly entering traffic 3 blocks behind her. It kept its distance. No flashing lights, no visible guards, only one instruction had been given: protect her, without letting her know. The city settled into evening as office buildings emptied and traffic filled the streets. Emily walked alone through the crowded sidewalks, keeping her head down. She carried only a small bag over her shoulder. Leaving the estate had felt like the right decision. At least that was what she kept telling herself. If she stayed with Adrian, she believed she would become the reason innocent people were hurt. If she disappeared, perhaps everything would return to normal. She did not know that nothing about the situation was normal anymore. 3 blocks behind her, a black sedan blended into the traffic. Inside, Marcus sat in the front passenger seat, watching the street through lightly tinted windows. 2 security officers occupied the back seats. No one spoke. Their instructions were simple: protect Emily. Do not interfere unless absolutely necessary. Adrian had been very clear. She believes she is making her own decision, let her. Marcus understood why. Trust could not be forced. Across the city, inside the Falcon Group's penthouse, another meeting had begun. Large digital maps covered one wall. Red markers showed Adrian's business properties. Blue markers tracked Emily's movements. The group's leader calmly studied the information. One of his lieutenants smiled. She left the estate. Yes, and his security is following her. The older man nodded. As expected. Should we take her now? No, the lieutenant looked confused. We've waited long enough. The older man shook his head. You still think this is about kidnapping? It isn't. No, he turned toward the windows overlooking the harbor. If we attack the woman, he paused, Adrian will respond with everything he has. We lose, the lieutenant slowly nodded. So what do? We attack something more valuable. The Empire, the older man smiled faintly. No, his reputation. That night, anonymous messages began appearing across encrypted criminal networks. The rumor spread quickly. Adrian Morty risks his organization for one woman. Within hours, more stories followed. Some claimed she was a hidden weakness. Others insisted she secretly controlled his decisions. Most of the stories were false, but rumors required no proof. They only needed listeners. By midnight, nearly every major criminal organization in the city had heard some version of the story. Inside Blackstone Holdings, Adrian listened as Marcus summarized the situation. The rumors are spreading exactly as they intended. Adrian stood beside the office window overlooking the sleeping city. They're trying to make loyalty look like weakness. Marcus nodded. Our younger captains are becoming restless. They fear we'll appear vulnerable. Adrian remained silent for a moment. Then he asked, who started it? Marcus handed him another report. We traced the first messages. The Falcon Group. Everyone repeated them. Adrian closed the folder. They've already made their mistake. Marcus frowned slightly. They have. They believe reputation is built by gossip. He looked toward the conference room. Gather everyone. An hour later, every senior captain sat around the same table where Adrian had ended the previous meeting. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone had heard the rumors. Adrian entered without acknowledging them. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table. Our Eastern shipments. Marcus opened the document. Every missing shipment, every stolen container, every hidden warehouse, all listed. Several captains looked confused. Adrian spoke calmly. The Falcon Group spent months distracting us. He pointed toward the reports. So I let them believe they succeeded. The room became silent. One captain leaned forward. You knew. I knew enough. Marcus slowly understood. The rumors. They distracted them from their own mistakes. Adrian nodded once. While they watched Emily, he slid another folder across the table. We identified every route, every account, every ally they depended on. No dramatic speech followed, only facts. 3 coordinated financial investigations had already begun through legitimate authorities. Several corrupt shipping contracts had been anonymously exposed. Banks quietly froze key accounts. Business partners withdrew support overnight. None of Adrian's men fired a single shot. Within 48 hours, the Falcon Group's influence collapsed under its own hidden corruption. The victory belonged to patience, not violence. The following afternoon, Marcus found Adrian standing alone in the estate gardens. The Falcon leader left the city. Adrian nodded. He won't return. The threat is over. Adrian looked toward the fountain where Emily had stood the previous morning. Not entirely. Marcus followed his gaze. You're thinking about her. I'm thinking about what comes next. For the first time in many years, Adrian had protected both his empire and the promise that defined him. But one question remained unanswered. Emily still believed she had to face the world alone. And somewhere in the city, she was beginning a new chapter without knowing that the greatest battle fought for her had happened almost entirely in silence. 3 weeks passed. The headlines never mentioned Adrian Morty. They spoke instead about financial investigations, corrupt business networks, canceled shipping contracts, and several influential executives who quietly disappeared from public life. To the rest of the city, it looked like another shift in the balance of power. Very few people understood who had truly directed it. Even fewer knew why. Emily rented a small apartment above a neighborhood bookstore on the western side of the city. It was modest but peaceful. She found work helping the elderly owner organize books, manage deliveries, and keep the shop running. The salary was small. The quiet was priceless. For the first time in years, nobody shouted at her. Nobody compared her to someone else. Nobody expected her to disappear into the background. She slowly began to smile again, not often, but genuinely. One rainy afternoon, she noticed a familiar black umbrella resting beside the bookstore entrance. It looked almost identical to the one she had once given away. The sight made her pause. She smiled to herself. Some memories never truly left. Across the city, Adrian stood inside his office overlooking the skyline. Marcus entered with a thin folder. "Our people checked on Miss Carter." Adrian looked up. "Only from a distance," Marcus added. "As instructed." He placed the folder on the desk. "She has steady work. She's safe. She refused financial assistance we arranged anonymously." Adrian gave the smallest hint of a smile. "I expected that." Marcus hesitated. "You could meet her." Adrian walked toward the window. "No. Why not?" "Because she finally has something she earned herself." He looked out across the city. "If I remain in her life, my world eventually reaches her. And my world has a price." Marcus understood. Sometimes protecting someone meant knowing when to step away. That evening, the bookstore prepared to close. Emily locked the front door and turned off the lights. As she looked through the front window, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street. It remained there only a few seconds. Then it quietly drove away. She never saw who sat inside, but somehow, she knew. She whispered softly into the empty street, "Thank you." The car never stopped. Inside the moving sedan, Adrian sat in silence. He had heard nothing. He had seen only that the bookstore lights had gone out and Emily had gone safely inside. That was enough. He looked once through the rain-covered window before facing forward again. "Let's go." The driver nodded. The sedan disappeared into the evening traffic. The city would continue fearing Adrian Morty. His enemies would continue respecting the promises he made. His organization would continue following him because they had witnessed something no rumor could destroy. A man whose word was stronger than his power. And somewhere in a quiet bookstore far from luxury estates and hidden empires, a woman who had once believed she was invisible finally understood that her kindness, offered to a lonely stranger years before, had changed a life she never truly knew. Neither of them called again. Neither of them needed to. Some promises are not remembered because they are spoken. They are remembered because they are kept.